welcome to Stoughton Politics with this guy. My name is Noah Beit Aharon. I am a town meeting representative from Precinct 6, along with many other things. I'm an author, Hebrew school principal. We do all the things. But having recently gotten into politics at the town level, I wanted to learn more in front of a camera so that you can learn more too. So with me today, we have Rachel Lazarus.
Hello.
Newly elected.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Newly elected to the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority. First of all, why don't you tell us what Stoughton Redevelopment Authority is?
So the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority, I got a lot of blank looks during when I was saying I'm campaigning for this and just saying like I want to get on this committee because I want to help the downtown area. I want to make it more vibrant. I want to make it more beautiful. I want to make sure that the store owners currently there are feeling supported by the town. I want to figure out some ways to like juice the business community in our town, which is very much thriving. And I also want to improve the conditions of some of the buildings there. So the Redevelopment Authority can do all of those things. It's a special kind of like state-run commission that can, where a blighted area or an area that's not in really good shape can be under the aegis of a redevelopment authority in general. And then there are some ways that we can get buildings improved, that there are ways that we can cut some red tape through and get things faster. And right now what I'm really focusing on is getting the urban renewal plan from our desk to the select board because it's been approved by the planning board. We just have to sign off on it, I think, and then get it to the select board. There may be some more changes. I know that there are some changes that people want to know about. The State Theater is one of those things that I absolutely want to be, if not restored, then at least usable. As a community center space would be one of my ideals. But having a theater, whether or not it's a theater, whether it's some kind of other like hub for community, I think that would be a great space for it. It also could be something for housing. So all of this is off the topic of, because I talked about what I want to do, as opposed to what it is. So it's a committee that oversees the downtown areas.
Okay. And you talk about this action plan.
Mm-hmm. The urban renewal plan?
The urban renewal plan that you would send to the select board under
We have not yet sent it to the select board.
Let's say you did. Let's say the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority did send this plan to the select board and the select board signed off on it. What then? Would that be like a law? Would that be binding in some way? What would the
It would help us move
be?
Forward on the town master plan, which we already have and is about to be, I believe it's about to be a 5-year, I don't know if it's a 5-year renewal or just like update to the town master plan. But it would help us get the priorities in the town master plan, which have already been agreed to, done in a cost-effective manner, in a climate-effective manner, I hope, because we have this great opportunity to use resources that will be cheaper in the future, rather than basically increasing our dependence on gas and oil, which are just going to go up and up and up, and focusing more on renewables, which will keep our costs way further down in the future. I don't want to change the character of downtown in any way, but I would like to plant more trees in any place that we can, to make it a beautiful place to walk through.
Yeah, I've read a little bit about tree planting in towns and cities and how it doesn't just make a difference in terms of, sucking carbon out of the atmosphere. It makes a much bigger difference in terms of how cool or hot a town center gets, whether we're getting baked by the sun or have some shade. There's there are a number of ways in which tree planting, which seems very simple and like a 19th century solution, can actually improve things dramatically.
A lot of, and you asked me about this redevelopment authority, and I'm already responding as Secretary of the Climate Action Plan Committee.
Well, so let's go into that for a moment. You're also Secretary of the Climate Action Plan Committee.
Yes, I am. The secretary's job is generally to take minutes, which is the bane of my existence, and just should share to everyone how passionate I am about climate change and adaptation and mitigation, and really making us a center for these things, because there is nothing I hate more than taking notes. And I have to take so many notes for this, and it is generally awful, but I'm doing it because this is important. This will pay off for Stoughton over time. And if no one else is going to do it, I will.
If I can make, I want to make an argument for taking notes and for being secretary, because I am terrible at taking notes. I was terrible at it in high school. I was terrible at it in college. I always learned the most by keeping my hands still and listening. And I only started appreciating it when I became briefly, for 1 year, secretary of the Hanson PTO. And having to record the minutes.
Yeah.
While it was difficult and frustrating and tedious, it also, it forced me to pay attention to what was going on and to really absorb what was happening in a way that, you know, in previous or subsequent years, I might have sometimes been spacing out during a meeting, or, you know, like you're in a PTO meeting for a little while and you start to think about other things.
And not only that, but
and it makes a difference.
Yeah,
like,
no, but it's also,
I'm sure you know what climate.
Well, let me just pause for a second, because it's also our record. Like, people can watch the video because of SMAC, which is wonderful. But videos don't give you where you want to go. If I really want to talk about, we brought up tree planting in one of the most recent Climate Action Plan committees, and my notes will tell you when they're uploaded to the website where you want to go if you just want to see that section. And the other thing is, as a record for history, what is written down is what people will know and remember and look for, what will be in the searches. If you don't write it down, and if you don't write it down carefully, then other people won't know that it happened. So I personally, I love that we have minutes. I love that note-taking is, I agree with you that note-taking is good. I just don't want to do it. But if someone has to do it, I will.
I mean, look, I got a lot out of writing my summaries of what happened at town meetings this year. And it made a difference in terms of my enjoyment and my ability to do something useful, in my opinion. The fact that I wasn't taking traditional minutes, that I wasn't saying, you know, first we voted on this, and that, you know, that vote went 115 to 47, and then we voted on this, and that vote went like this, and then like being able to do what our brains do naturally, which is to cut out all of the stuff that they're not going to bother remembering, and just sort of choose the things that seemed important and relevant and talk about those. That I think that makes a big difference. And so being able to, because it's true, anyone could review the footage of what happened at town meeting, and they could make up their own minds, and they can write their own summaries of what happened. Maybe they think different things are important from what I thought was important. But it makes a big difference to be able to read a few paragraphs in 5 minutes rather than having to review multiple hours, 3.5 hour
where there
meetings.
is a lot of dead space. But also, specifically on the note-taking on the procedural stuff. That's important, because if you do it wrong, if you don't do these little procedural things, then a lot can be held up by that. Like the urban renewal plan, it seems like people didn't realize that it was done. And had they checked the minutes very carefully, as I did in preparation for running for office, because I am very much the Hermione Granger of the world when it comes to like just knowing what
to make a reference that makes sense to everybody in our generation. like it or hate it.
Smarty
And,
pants.
yeah.
Who is the nerd in any show from like the 60s or 70s? That's me. Take your pick. I fit that archetype. So I think it is very important to know how to get things done. Sometimes you need to do that procedural, someone make a motion. You have to make the motion. There are people who rules lawyer a lot, and that you see that happening in town meetings. Some people are very good at that. Some people take a lot of time to do that, and some people don't know what's happening. And that's the kind of thing that people want to zone out at. But it is important to make sure things are done right, so you don't have to pay the penalty later. Like, it's like the pinch of protection, pound of a cure.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to get things done the right way and have a record, basically. And this paper record or digital record, this record is important even though it's tedious. I admit that it's tedious. We have to have some healthy part of our meal before we get to the ice cream of discussing the things we really want to discuss about and are really excited about. So that was my defense of boring parts of meetings. Yeah. I might be trying to convince myself here a little bit of that, but
I mean, look, one thing that I know deep down inside is that the things that are boring to one person are not always the same as what are boring to somebody else. I found it fascinating that that there is a parallel between the Senate procedure of invoking cloture and the town meeting procedure of moving the question, and like that made that interesting to me in a way that I'm sure it made no sense and was utterly boring to most of the people in the room.
Yeah, so one of the things that I talked to Becca Markson, who's now on FinCom and was previously on Charter Review, and I often look to optimize things and just like, can we get this done in the most efficient, the least expensive way, hitting everyone's priorities. When these things are in tension, how do you make it so that everybody gets at least something and no one is left worse off? There's a lot of wonky policy terms that I could use for that, but not worth explaining. Not worth it when you can just say in plain language, like, how do we make sure everyone is being treated well? How do we make sure everyone is getting something out of this agreement? And one of the things Becca was saying to me is that there's a difference between changing something willy-nilly just because you don't see the point in it. Are you trying to, one of the questions she asked is, are you trying to make a structural change because you don't like a single person or the way or a single event went? Or are you trying to say, like, we do it this way because this is how it is? Like, this is the best way, you just haven't seen the exception yet that proves why this is good. Like Robert's Rules of Order, and whatever the technical thing of what we follow, if you have someone trying to disrupt your meeting, Robert's Rules of Order is amazing. Keeping people to 2 minutes of speaking, amazing. Yeah. Was this ever relevant when I'm on the Board of Library Trustees? No. Has it been relevant in other committees? Yes. Is it very relevant at select board meetings? Yes. That is the kind of civility that you can't, the decorum is important there.
Yeah.
And if people don't follow that, we are very far from the violent days of Charles Sumner and all the other very wild things that happened in both towns and states and countries. But we're doing this in this annoyingly fiddly way to prevent that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Tell me, because you touched on it just for a moment, how the climate action plan and the housing plan dovetail. Where is the intersection?
All of the plans that we're doing, the facilities master plan, which is about the schools and the order that they're being done in, the town master plan, the climate action plan, is really kind of to accentuate the changes that have already been approved of in the town master plan. Like, we want to move the town in the direction of the way that the town wants to go. We want to do it in a slightly different fashion in some cases. Like, mandating that every house has an electrical hookup instead of an oil and gas hookup, or in addition to an oil and gas hookup. That's kind of like the building code willy-nilly that makes it possible for people to embrace green, renewable energy so that you have the option to from the start, as opposed to
having to pay to update your house.
Now I bought a house with an oil heater and it's going to cost me $5,000 and I don't want to do that. But if you have like the hookup to or like solar panels on the house already or whatever, I'm not good. Please don't quote me on any specific examples. I'm just going off the top of my head. What the Climate Action Plan wants to do is to provide opportunities, which we can take, and every opportunity we do take, I believe, will lead to a better outcome. And that is why I do the minute taking that I do, so we can, and the working with other committees, because one of the things that I found from being on the Climate Action Plan Committee and getting to do like direct work with the 300th Anniversary Committee, to talk to the Planning Department, the Planning Committee, and all of the other committees, like they sound really boring. They sound like, and they can work poorly, but they can work well. And I think that a lot of the committees have people who want to have it work well. And what we can do when we bring it together, I think, is really powerful. So we want, for example, Climate Action Plan, one of our things is we want more trees in Stoughton. And someone in our committee had the idea, why don't we do something for the 300th anniversary? And so I brought that idea to the 300th Anniversary Committee. And I said, like, we want to plant 300 trees in Stoughton in honor of the 300th anniversary idea. And I think that's going to be awesome. Okay. And someone on the 300th Anniversary Committee went like, we can't plant 300 trees at once because that is going to be expensive and we don't know where the room is for new trees are and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, well, you know what's really cool is I'm also working with the town planner, Bill Roth, and he and DPW are working on where we can put more trees. So there's already all of this work in place. We don't have to duplicate. We can bring together. And so, like, if the plan is over the next 5 years, DPW is going to plant 300 trees in honor of the 300th anniversary. Or if DPW plants 200 trees and we give 100 trees away to families who want to plant something in their yard. Like, there are all of these ways that we can all work together for cheaper and build the community. There is so much talent in this town. There are so many great people with different areas of expertise, and I love it when people can get together and learn from each other and really get that, like you're pulling back a pinball at the starting position to let it go forward, because it really is, there's this chemistry that can happen when people are working together, when they're problem solving together, and they're not siloed off.
Yeah. I want to take a step back and talk a little bit about elections, and because you and I are both in our 30s, there's a little bit.
A lady's age.
What's that?
Not supposed to reveal a lady's age. Come on.
I didn't. We're within a decade.
I'm older than he is, by the way. So
there's a little bit of a stereotype about town politics, not just in Stoughton, but in general, that it's something you do when you have too much time on your hands. You know, maybe you're retired and looking for something to fill your day with, or unemployed, or otherwise, you know, not busy, and so you get involved. And you know, it's interesting to me. You know, I feel the need to bust that stereotype and to say that it doesn't have to be that way, because I know that you have 3 children under 10, and that you are quite busy much of the time and still able to make time to make our town better.
So I want to say 2 things. One is that I couldn't get this done without my wonderful spouse, who takes care of the kids while I am in these meetings on Zoom or in person, whatever. Wonderful, best spouse in the world. Sorry, everybody else.
My wife won't take it personally.
So I can do that because I have somebody to watch the kids, and I have enough of an income that I'm not having to go get a night job. I'm not having to work shifts somewhere. So, but you're saying there's a stereotype of Stoughton or local politics always being done by like retired people with time on their hands. I say that's not true. I say the issue is that things are scheduled at night and relatively later at night. So it's easier to do it if you're not doing bedtimes, if you're not working night shifts. We have town meeting Mondays and Wednesday evenings from 7 to 10:30. That is a time commitment that not everyone can have. A single mom with 3 kids under the age of 10, someone who doesn't have my best spouse in the world, is not going to be able to participate in town meeting. There's just not that buffer. I am lucky enough to have the buffer to use that.
I do want to say, we had, there was child care provided at town meeting until 9:30 by, I want to say, the Stoughton Y or something along those lines. So there are efforts to make that viable, and then the town meeting representatives who have availed themselves of that child care, who've brought their kids with them to the Stoughton High School, then, you know, they end up having to leave an hour early because it ends at 9:30. But they are able to participate and be involved.
It's not that the town is doing something wrong. Like I don't want to say that. I'm saying like you can think of it as a structural problem, and one that is faced by many people. In the same way that there is the idea of structural racism, where it's not that people intended things to get worse off for certain groups, but it was the natural response. And if you don't take efforts to weed your lawn is going to get covered in weeds. And then you're going to be like, well, my lawn is so covered in weeds, there's nothing to do but just to cut all the weeds down and never do anything different. So it is a policy thing.
I think I have to stop you there for a minute because you brought up structural racism, which is a big flashpoint. Everybody loves to argue online about what this means and whether it's real. And
are we getting into the smackdown? Is this the time for the smackdown? Should we have like an interstitial?
Well, I have been joking that we will have a segment called the Smackdown to knock down any particular nonsense that happens to be going on at any time. I don't know if we'll actually do that section, but if we do, this is a great time for a graphic.
So first of all, I want to say structural racism it's not about who you are. It's not that anything was intentional. It is, there is a structural bias in we've built societies in this way. And the structural inequality is probably the best way of referring to it, not just structural racism. There is structural inequality in our system. As long as we live under capitalism, this is going to continue. I, for one, am a capitalist, and I'm going to stay that way. So I want the system to be mitigated, not torn down, I think.
So I want to put a little bit more detail on it, because we do have some confusion as to what structural means in this sense. How can something that is neutrally worded be structurally racist or structurally classist or some other way?
So that was what I was talking about with town meeting. If you can't be part of town meeting because you work 7 to 10:30, you work the night shift, and you can't miss your job for some random number of nights in May and possibly November, then you are structurally disincluded. And that might be a compromise that people are willing to make, because most people, and most of the people who show up to town meeting, and surely the people who run for town meeting who have that time and that energy, then yeah, that's going to be a thing, that people are excluded, not because everyone was going, you're bad, you're wrong, but just they didn't know about it. I think when people ask, like, why are there so many Jewish hospitals and Catholic hospitals? That's because Jews and Catholics a century ago were not always able to be served at a hospital.
At a general population
At a general
hospital.
population, because there's too much discrimination. Why do southern buildings sometimes have more water fountains than the northern building equivalent was? Well,
Right.
that's the legacy of segregation. It's not about intent, it's about impact. I think when people hear the term racism at all, you're saying I'm a bad person. And I'm not saying that, because this is nothing about like you're seeing someone with a different color skin and you are suddenly terrible or whatever. Like, no, that's not at all what I'm happening. I'm saying like as we walk along, as we do our daily thing, as we're going from street to street, as we're going around, like things happen and you fall into a groove and you have to make that effort to get out of that groove. It's the difference between not even that it's like it's the choice between being easy and being right. That's not it at all. It is, are we willing to invest the resources as a community in making this change? Now, I'm not saying that we can change committee meetings from all of them being at 7, because that is better for most people. Like if we had it Sunday mornings instead, people go to church. Like it's not like there is a compromise here that everybody gets their way all at once. It would be too expensive. It would be this, it would be that. But you have to be mindful of the people that you are unintentionally leaving out. And if you're not doing that, then you are continuing the structural racism, the institutional racism that happens. Structural inequality and inequality. Like the easiest way to get to Harvard is to have someone who in your family who went to Harvard, right, and pays them a lot of money. And you can purchase a degree from Harvard very easily if you have that money. And then you have this credential that you can use. That doesn't say anything about your skill or value as a person. It's just some people have access to the money that can get you a degree from Harvard, and some people can't. And the person who has the degree from Harvard, look, we all know that it's not just based on academics. And even if it is based on academics, there's still variation that you have to take into account. So it's just, nothing has to be part of an evil plot to have negative consequences, is I think one of the things that I just want to separate out. So when I'm talking about inequality, when I'm talking about racism,
right,
when
we're talking about consequences and not intentions.
Yeah, and it's not that your world is not getting worse because someone else has an opportunity. Because if that's what's happening, if you're saying my world is worse because those people are able to get jobs or they're getting a boost up, that's not what DEI is for at all. And it's also, what are you saying about yourself that if more people enter the race, you can't win? So you have to limit it to just these people who have already raced before. I think a lot about the Jewish story of immigration and assimilation and the ways that our grandparents, for us in our 30s, our grandparents were not allowed into the country clubs, and our parents were, and maybe dominate the country clubs now because that was their way of feeling successful. And the Jewish immigration story, like the Italian immigration story, like the Polish immigration story, like those are stories that are on their 3rd or 4th generation in America, whereas newer populations that are moving in have not had that same story. That same immigrant population works up to the 2nd generation so that they can be part of it, like kind of like how Joe Kennedy wanted JFK to be president, because that was the generation that could do it, that was ready for an Irish Catholic. I talk a lot about a lot of topics, but my passion is American history. And that's also where a lot of my expertise really originally lies. And then you see, once you know history, I went into history because I wanted to know everything. And history isn't everything. And all of the committees that I'm on are overlapping. And all of them are circling around the same idea. So what you need is someone who can push it forward and just be like, okay, I'm gonna focus on getting trees planted. I'm gonna talk to the people I'm going to talk to the Stoughton 300th Anniversary Committee, because even though that wasn't my idea, I saw a great idea. I want to make it happen.
Yeah.
And
I mean, in terms of the Jewish story, not only in America but all around the world, you know, a lot of Jewish people got into politics specifically, and we're a very politically engaged population in just about every country we're in. And there's you know, there's certainly a lot of conspiracy theories that are spun up around that fact, but I think what happened was that our people as a population, we learned very hard the lesson that it doesn't matter if you care about politics, because regardless, politics cares about you.
Yeah, and I can see that. And also, like, talk about unintended structural inequality. Federal calendar, federal holidays include Christmas and Easter. They do not include Yom Kippur. And it wouldn't make sense for them to include Yom Kippur, et cetera. Like, I'm not, like, angry about that.
Right.
But
I mean,
to my friends who say there's
not saying that the federal government should say this particular what is it, 0.2% of the population.
No, I don't need to be. I don't need my needs to be
so.
catered to. I don't need to be the center. I don't need the federal government to center on me. I don't need state or town government to center on me. My view is that you are a public servant when you are a politician in office, and you are serving not your own needs, but the town's needs. You have to put them aside, maybe. But in general, people are unaware of how much they already have because they're complaining and they're fixated on the things they don't have. So everything seems like a threat when you're afraid of losing status or losing your position or losing your possessions or losing your house. So people get into this is a threat when it actually probably isn't. And if you, like, we fear the unknown, we fear the potential consequences. I learned that, you know, I can have every policy argument in the world and people are still going to be focused on the things that emotionally resonate with them and the things that are very important. Like, I wanted to talk briefly about this elementary school and the recall, or not the recall, the revote, basically.
The revote, yes.
And I was someone who voted in the initial June 11th election, and I'd been, like, vaguely aware but not paying attention to it because my kids are not going to go to a different school. The closest one to us is going to remain the Gibbons. So I was just like, okay, cool, new school. That there's a
Seems
design
like a
for
good
it.
thing.
Yeah, no, I like schools. Okay, if there's going to be an increase in my taxes for a little bit, you know what? It's worth it overall. Like, that'll bring more people in, et cetera. So it wasn't, like, personal for me the way it was for parents in the South School.
Right.
But then when it was defeated, and I realized that the reason it had been defeated was that people were lying about the costs of the school and the costs of not building the school, I got upset because I don't like it when people lie. And I went to the numbers. I contacted Mr. Recupero, and I said,
Mr.
Recupero is the head of the elementary school building committee, who'd shepherded this project, and he gave me access to every single document that had ever been in the mind's eye from conception to that point, all of the documents he sent to me. And I read through a lot of them because special talent in reading, liking to absorb information, want to know everything. And very quickly I realized that the elementary school was such a well-done plan, and that the people who were complaining about it weren't considering the opportunity costs of not building the school, weren't considering the basic costs of what they had. Now, the South School, it was a particularly urgent point because things had fallen apart. And people were, and I think rightfully, a little upset that things hadn't been fixed in the South School earlier. And that's a really complicated reason. There's very complicated reasons that every moment made sense. The school was going to need a new roof, and it was deemed to be not eligible for, basically the school system had said, we need to replace the South School in 2010, 2011, the Facilities Master's Plan, and that's going to be our priority. But we had to get the high school done first because that affected more students and the accreditation would work on the funding. So through no one's fault, the South School moved down on the list of priorities. And then it took 9 tries to get accepted into the building grant that we finally got for, 47 million. It took us 9 years, basically, of submitting that, because we didn't want the town to bear the cost of building a brand new school all on our own, because that is both cost inefficient and meant that we wouldn't be suiting the needs of the town as it was growing. So you have that, and then COVID.
Right.
And all of the inflation that happened post-COVID jerked up the price, and the grant did cover a lot of it. The grant was sufficient for the new pricing, and then South School needed a new roof, and people were asking why they hadn't been getting a new roof, because they thought that the roof was the problem and not the entire building structure. And when people asked why it had taken so long, why weren't we taking care of our buildings? Well, first of all, I don't think there was ever a funding request fulfilled for the South School. And the attitude was, it's just not our priority. We can wait until later to do that. And then we got to the point where...
It's an issue all across the country.
No.
People like to defer maintenance and
Stoughton's actually
defer
pretty
new
good
projects.
about this overall, I would say, because you do have the town meeting that comes up every year, and talks are coming up, and there is some institutional memory, but not a ton, because we've had so many different changes in town manager, and the population of town meeting changes over, so you lose some of that knowledge. But for the elementary school, by the time it finally got onto the ballot, it was urgent.
Right.
Urgent to get it replaced immediately. And people were wondering why. And why hadn't Stoughton acted differently in the coming years? Why hadn't they already jacked up the price, taxes, to pay for it in the future? What do you want to have changed? You want a new fire station, you want this, you want that. There is going to be a compromise. And then people are saying we're paying for too much. There's a lot going on right now in building because we hadn't invested long term. So I really want the town master plan, to get back to it, the facilities master plan. I want them to be done with the best materials possible, with as low of a cost as possible, and with the opportunity for growth in the future, as opposed to locking us in.
I think in general there's a tendency for people to say the best time to do X would have been earlier, and unless you happen
Recupero
to have,
TJ Recupero said that to me.
It's often true, but unless you have a time machine, the second best time is often now.
Yeah, and that was word for word what TJ Recupero said to me.
Yeah.
About the cheapest time to build is always yesterday.
Right. But let's talk. Speaking of time to build, let's talk about the urban renewal plan, because I'm interested in where that's headed. And
well, we have a vacancy still on the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority. You can apply at the select board, or for that, to be appointed by the select board. If you want, you have to go to town hall and fill out an application, give it to Reggie. It's great. She's very nice. Even before she was town clerk, she was so nice to me when I was applying for the first time for library trustee 9 years ago. And you'd asked me before, why did I get involved in town politics? What am I doing in town politics? And when it started, it was, I didn't know anybody in Stoughton. I love libraries. I read in the Stoughton Shopper or something that was going around, they have an opening here. There are 2 vacancies, I'm gonna get appointed. And I didn't know at the time that they advertised vacancies, but the people who wanted to be on the trustees have to reapply. So it was actually, I kind of jumped the queue a little bit because I didn't know how things worked. And the person who wanted to be on the library trustees board got on eventually. It's great. I had done something that was kind of a social faux pas, but not actually consequential in any way. I just felt bad for a while. But you have to make the mistake to know what the mistake is.
Right.
You have to learn from that. You have to grow from that. Sometimes figures change because of new information. Having a different answer because you have different information does not mean you were lying before or that you're lying now. It means situation changed.
Right. It reminds me of the way that people talked about COVID when it was before it was all about distance, and now you're talking about everyone needs masks. And it's like, well, okay, but the everyone, was the people studying the problem, and they learned more over time, right? When it hit us, it was a pandemic no one had seen before.
The issue with COVID, in fact, is that it was so novel that we didn't know how things could get treated. And that is why so many people passed from it, because it was something unexpected. And there was a period of time where a lot of different solutions were being tried out. And immediately there were shortages of masks, so we tried to prioritize them in the same way that surgeons have been wearing masks in hospitals your dental
for a long time.
Your dental hygienist wears a mask when she's looking over your face. Like, oh, that does work. There aren't very many of them, so how about we go make our cloth ones, and everyone else, like the people who are important, they get the KN95s, because they're doing the work right now.
Right.
I could have one in reserve, but they need it now. And so I have all of these beautiful masks that my friends made me, because I didn't know how to sew until post-COVID, or that was my later in the pandemic skill set. And they aren't best practices anymore, so we don't wear them. And instead we get the K95 masks that are best practices.
And you make mask chains out of them and decorate something.
Yeah, exactly. Or donate it to the fabric things, like those big white bins.
The big white
They'll
bins,
take any kind of fabric that actually gives money to the schools for the recycling. Again, like everything actually really is connected. So I don't remember how we got there, but
I was asking you about the urban planning.
Yeah, so the urban renewal plan, what do people want in downtown? That is the first thing I'm asking people. Like, what do you want downtown? A lot of people said they want the State Theater. They want that restored, or they want it not to be an eyesore. From the day I moved to this town, I heard people complaining about that giant hole, which is no longer there.
Yes, I remember that.
And like
that giant hole.
Yeah, so I moved here in 2016, so people were complaining about it. And I remember driving through Stoughton before and being like to my spouse, like, ugh, that looks kind of gross. But we ended up moving here and being really happy about that. And now that hole is fixed. What can we do next? Like, what's next? And so I think I really want to figure out both the urban renewal plan, getting that to jibe together with the other plans again, and making sure we're doing what is fiscally responsible and what is the best interests of our future. And then I want to have a beautiful downtown. And I'm talking a lot about beauty because the aesthetics matter, which is not something I would have said earlier in my lifetime, because I was very much like, the colors don't matter, clothes don't matter, like none of that. Like I'm gonna go around like a little vagabond, and if they really cared, they would see my mind instead of like that my hair is, no one cares. Like, no, you have to care about what other people care about. And you have to make the decisions on a government level, you have to make decisions, sometimes unpopular decisions, so that other good things can happen to fill that void. So like I've been talking, I did a lot of work for the elementary school building committee or not for the committee, for the campaign, because I happen to have a skill set.
Right.
And I happened to have all of these documents now that I'd asked for it. So I could see when people were like, well, they never even considered this, and I could just pull up the PDF of,
Here's when they considered this.
This is when they considered it, and this is why they didn't do it. Like, they could have had different designs, and these are the designs. Like, I remember there was one person who was like, they never considered any other design. It's one design. This is the only thing. Why would you ever buy first? Just locking into the one design, the first one they showed you. And I was like, actually, there's this big spreadsheet. I can just post it here, which has all of the school building committee members' comments on it. And this was one of 3 designs that passed to the final stage. And it was the one that everyone liked the most. And it's actually the cheapest of those 3. I mean, like, it's expensive, but like relatively, it's cheaper. So, and I found this with like half minute of looking, because all of those documents are posted online.
Right.
And then I posted that several times, and the person who I was originally responding to, she did something I really didn't like, which was she kept posting her original comment. And I was like, look, do I have to follow you around and call you a liar each time with this chart? And like people got so dug in to their original perspectives and what should have been done that they really didn't see what is. And here, what is, we had a school falling apart, we had the cheapest possible plan in front of us, and we had people who did not believe that their tax rates would be, that people believed something about their tax rates, that they could only be taxed that 2.5% and no other taxes, without considering that, first of all, there are other government ways of collecting taxes and fees, we usually call them fees at that point, that would have been very bad for us. And also that sometimes it's better to do the thing that is like, it's gonna cost you 67 million over doing the thing that costs you 155 million. And if you're just not going to believe me when I say this thing is going to cost 155 million, I'm gonna break it down. This is the kind of school you say you want. This is the plan for what's gonna happen to the Wilkins. This is the plan. I don't think people really considered when they were suggesting a neighborhood school for the South Elementary, first how overcrowded the South already was. We already had so many elementary school students because this is such a great town, people want to move here. Right. And we had, so we had that. And also there's this plan of closing the Jones and moving those offices to the Wilkins building and combining it so that we'd have more room overall. And then we'd only be, and the plan is for only 6 school buildings to be controlled by the school, the SPS, instead of 8, which is an immediate savings, which is reduction in
heating costs and
fixed costs, plumbing,
electricity,
installation at 2 different sites versus 1. Yeah. And then your utilities are going down. It is so much cheaper. Like the South School is 1/5 of the size of the new high school as it was, and the utilities are 5 times higher than they were at the high school. Or they are. Yeah, no. Yeah. So it's like, here are the savings. Please believe me. I also live in town. I also want this to happen. I don't really want my taxes to go up more, but I really don't want them going up by this much. So it is frustrating when people don't update. Yeah. Or when I say, if someone's showing a slide saying like, well, why are we paying this much when these 4 towns all got cheaper? And I go, well, actually, the reason why those 4 towns got larger grants is because those 4 towns are very poor. And the MSBA is clearly giving out money based on the income of the median income of the town, and not because Newton got less than we did. Newton's very expensive. It's like people focus on one bit of the picture that seems wrong to them and can't realize that it's part of a larger pattern. In the same way that if you say like this is the product of structural racism, people are going to hear that and say, you think I'm racist. You think I don't deserve this. I worked really hard for this. How dare you? You're the one that's wrong. And that wasn't what I was saying at all. That was never what I was saying. I don't assume, like, I'm learning from that experience, and from people telling me, like, the reason we didn't vote for the new school is because our property taxes are too high and we can't afford this increase. And I went, there is a solution for that if you're a senior on a fixed income. Right. And then, so while I was wanting to focus just on the elementary school and doing those things, I started working on tax programs for senior tax relief. Right, because there's no such thing as just focusing on one problem and not noticing others. Because they're all interconnected, because we all have to do all of the things, or at least some of us have to do all of the things, or feel the compulsion to do all of the things.
That's another question.
So I started working in the middle while all of my, the people who I'd met who were really passionately working on school committee and like doing like campaigning and like going door to door and holding up signs and things, I was figuring out which of these 5 tax programs that were available in Massachusetts were actually authorized by Stoughton. Could we increase the amounts because these amounts are actually way too low? That problem got fixed in town meeting. Thank you, town meeting representatives, people who actually won. And to segue a little bit, because I know you mentioned you want to talk about this, the process of running. Yes. I am both a winner and a loser. in the most
True.
recent election.
True.
So I have some
Because you
experiences.
won your seat on the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority fairly handily, and did not make it into town meeting.
Yeah. And so is that like, did I do something wrong? Did I do something right? I found it really difficult for me to focus on promoting myself as a candidate rather than the policies. And I think that is something that, frankly, the people in Stoughton care more about the work than about me, the person. So I thought that was successful.
I mean, that's a part of why we ended up calling the show Stoughton Politics with this guy.
This random guy?
Is exactly, it was my daughter's suggestion. But what I liked about it as the name of the show is that it kind of brings home the fact that there is no special qualification that I have that somebody else in Stoughton doesn't have. It is literally just, did I ask? Did I have some free time to do the thing?
You asked and you pursued. Like,
Right.
you showed up.
Yes.
Because honestly,
And tons of politics is just showing up.
and I was the one who told you, SMAC, reading
That's
your town
correct.
meeting summaries would be great, because I know that SMAC is looking for a show, because we just had that little discussion before this show about, like, someone had come to me asking if Climate Action Plan could do a science show on something. Like, I knew they were looking for shows. I thought of you. And that is also like a form of privilege in a way.
For sure.
Because
Because it's built on social connections. It's
built
built
on
on
social
knowing someone
connections.
who would tell you,
Yes.
go and do the thing.
And it's also built on experience.
Yeah.
And so, like, someone who is brand new to the town, who doesn't, like me, just kind of muddle through life and fall into things, but someone who wants to do something, someone who's very prepared, someone who wants to be on the SRA because they really, really want to help the downtown area and improve it. They don't necessarily know that the way to do it is to fill out the application form and turn it into the town clerk, and then show up on X date to be interviewed by the select board, and then they figure out who they appoint.
Which means that you can go to the town hall and you can ask for that form.
You can ask for that form for any of the committees that are available, and also there's a very high chance at this point that you'll be working with me. If that might be like not an incentive, but
I don't know if that's an incentive or a disincentive.
I promise I'm quieter in meetings, because you have to let everyone talk. So running as a candidate as opposed to running for the school felt really scary. And it was not originally my idea. It was the idea of someone who I'd met and had talked to, who said, like, you know what, there's a couple of vacancies on the SRA, why don't you run? And I didn't want to at first, because I don't want to do another thing. I already did something today. I don't want to do all of it. It's not like I'm saying I want to be front and center in running. It is that I think, if I don't run, who is? Like, if not me or someone I talk to about running, then I've been asked, here's the opportunity, let's take it, let's see.
And that's something that I really appreciated in this past election from Stoughton in general, was that there weren't people running unopposed. And you see,
As I found out in Precinct 4.
all across the country, there are all these candidacies for all kinds of important stuff, whether it's sheriff or representative to Congress or
A committee in your
a
town
committee.
about
There
a
are
subject
all
you know
kinds
something
of things where people run unopposed. My race was about as close to unopposed as you can get, because there ended up being 11 of us on the ballot to fill 12 seats. So
And mine
all
was
it
much more
took,
competitive, yeah.
you know, if you want to know, like, what does it take to become a town meeting representative and be involved in Stoughton politics, it literally took me gathering 20 signatures. End of story. It's not to say that people didn't vote, but in my precinct, there were more seats than there were runners.
But it's also that you knew to do that because people had shown you the way. And I think a lot of the current town meeting reps, or the ones who had not been elected this previous one, were extremely generous in saying, this is how to run, these are the number of signatures. Yes,
Absolutely.
Carmel told Carmel, who's
Carmel
the
Drews, the deputy town moderator.
Like, literally assured me it's okay to write in your signature for yourself. It's okay for you to use your spouse. Everybody does that. That's not going to make you look bad. So when I went out and I went around to my neighbors, some of whom I never talked to before, some of whom I had, I was able to just go like, yeah, two signatures already on there, primed, you can sign. And they didn't care that it was me.
But my hope is that by doing shows like this, you don't need to know somebody. Because you know us. No, you don't need to know somebody because someone has already told you. It's not hard. If you have a question, you can literally go and ask the town clerk. I didn't learn the information that I was allowed to sign my own form from Carmel Drews. I learned it directly from the town clerk who was there.
And what is hard in Stoughton is that there's the kind of the towny culture of people who grew up here, and there are the people who moved in more recently, like us, as adults, choosing to live here because we love this town, because it's a great place to live and raise kids. But there's a certain level of you know if you know, and there's always this, oh yeah, well, FinCom is always this, like this, and this has always been a crazy committee to be on. And how am I supposed to know that without actually being on it? How am I supposed to know that select board meetings are always like this? I have to show up and do that. I have to go and do that scary time, that first time, to present, to go to the library board of trustees, go to the select board about saying, like, I want to be a library trustee because I like libraries and all that, and then actually go and actually show up. And sometimes you get appointed to a seat just because there are 6 spots open and only 5 people showed up. Sometimes there are 6 seats open and 7 people show up, and one of those 7 people is very, very unqualified. And so, like, literally just being a warm body on the committee is preventing something worse from happening. Is a good in and of itself. I would like to think that I am more than just a warm body on the committees that I serve on, because I do take public service and civic virtue very, very seriously. But at the same time, I didn't know what qualities in me were going to be brought out. Like, apparently I have the ability to take notes, which would have really, really shocked any teacher of mine growing up.
Oh yeah, same here.
And it's you learn this about yourself by doing it. And like, even though there are parts about running for office that suck, like I wanted my friend to be my treasurer, and it turns out she couldn't because she was a substitute teacher. I was able to call the state office and ask about that. It's so accessible, but you also have to try. And that's a hard step to take. So that's why I run for things, and that's why I tell people to run for things, because it's easier to do it if you see someone else do it first.
Very good. So we have 15 seconds left, and I would like to reiterate that call that you can do this work. You can
If this guy can do it,
if this guy can do it,
so
you can too. Thank you for coming to our first show.
Thank you for having me.
Come on, sugar. Come on.